What people are seeing is that Mark Carney, while he made grand promises of change, he's even worse than Justin Trudeau.
Yeah, I had to show you that again because Mark Carney is even worse than Justin Trudeau. I think he's even more ineffectual than Justin Trudeau. When we come back, we've got a lot to talk about today. Thanks for joining me today on Stand on Guard. I'm your host, David Krayden. We'll be right back in mere moments.
The Prime Minister lied and his minions continue to lie.
We need political change. But we also need to resolve to resist. Thanks for watching today, folks. It's a pleasure to be here. And I'm broadcasting live from Ottawa, as I always do. And we got lots to talk about today. But if you saw the title today, we're talking about net zero carney, and I got to start off the show with this wonderful sticker. And this is available when we get to the merchandise later. But I wanted to introduce this right now before I forgot, because I love this. Why do they call him net zero carney? Well, not just because he's obsessed with the environmental factor of net zero, which means stop using oil and gas, freeze in the winter, don't drive your car, don't take an aircraft. Don't use any fossil fuels, and I will benefit, says Mark Carney. So here's Mark Carney's record so far, and it's net zero. It adds up to zero. Zero budget, zero plan, zero Canadian investments, Canadian dollar investments, zero tariff wins, zero border control, zero safety in our streets, zero backbone. You know, crime is going up under Mark Carney. Remember, he was talking about safe streets, safe community. No, we've still got jail and bail. Yep. You want to defend yourself from a home intruder, though, you'll go to jail, or you'll get arrested at least, and have to go through all kinds of lawfare until you finally clear your name and get out of the court system, which can drag on for years and years. All the costs of a lawyer, all of the costs of going to court, all of the intended misery, the misery index. That's what Mark Carney's all about. Zero border control. Did a story yesterday. It should be up today on Blaze Media. Thank you very much for the research and the incredible work done by Rebel News at the Quebec-New York border. They used an infrared camera at night to discover like dozens of people every night being smuggled across the border. The cartels are operating on the Canada-U.S. border and Quebec and New York. And they're bringing in what looks to be a lot of Haitians who Donald Trump says you're no longer refugees in the United States. So either you go home or, well, I guess they decided to go north. And of course, Roxham Road. Remember when Justin Trudeau supposedly closed down Roxham Road? They had a big meeting with former President Joe Biden. In fact, I was there. Joe Biden came to Canada, his official visit to Canada, and the big result of that was an agreement to close the northern border of the United States. To close the northern border, close Roxham Road, and ensure that there was no illegal migration going on from Canada to the U.S. or from U.S. to Canada. The irony, of course, about all that was that while Joe Biden was talking about closing the northern border, the southern border was wide open and literally millions of people were getting in. And unharassed. And of course, once they got in, they got first-class treatment, they got jobs, they got hotel rooms, they got set up in apartments, they got free medical care, which most Americans don't get as citizens. Yeah, you've got to be below the poverty line or over age 65 to get Medicaid or Medicare in the United States. So most U.S. citizens don't get free so-called health care, but illegals did. And I explained in this article is that the precursor to this was the way Canada behaved towards illegals during the Justin Trudeau years. So anyway, to get back to it, our border with the United States is not closed. Fentanyl is getting through. Whoops, shouldn't have said that. And The, the Carney government is doing very little to enforce border security. So this is all true. And what about the tariff wins that Mark Carney was promising? Well, it's incredible to me. So they had a phone call yesterday. We're going to watch just a bit of the CBC report because it's nauseating. It's nauseating to see how the CBC likes to pretend that, hey, Mark Carney's got this under control. So let's have a quick look at this because this is fascinating. Here we go.
Prime Minister Mark Carney spoke with U.S. President Donald Trump on the phone today, weeks after blowing past the August 1st deadline for a trade deal. A readout from the Prime Minister's office says the leaders discussed current trade challenges, opportunities, and shared priorities in a new economic and security relationship between Canada and the U.S. The leaders.
In other words, Donald Trump said, I'll call you back. Trade challenges, opportunities, and shared priorities. What weasel words. What bureaucratese this is. They've already discussed this. Guess what? Here's what they discussed. We have some differences on trade and tariffs. And Carney didn't know that. Donald Trump didn't know that. You don't know that.
Also discussed how to build on the president's leadership to support long-term peace and security for Ukraine and Europe.
Okay, Mark Carney's not on board with long-term peace and security for Ukraine. He wants to keep funding the war, and he's going to give them another $2.2 billion. So how is Mark Carney in any way liaising with Donald Trump on this? There's nothing in common. And I explained, I'll get to
the
that.
readout also says Carney and Trump agreed to talk again soon. Let's bring in the power panel to talk about this. Cameron Ahmed was ahead of.
Okay, that's the key word here. CBC is making this up as they go along, trying again to cover Carney's ASS because he's done nothing. He's net zero Carney. He's producing nothing. He's actually completely ineffectual. He is one of the worst prime ministers we've ever had, who still somehow is maintaining fairly good numbers, fairly good approval rating in the polls. But what does it all mean? Well, actually, it adds up to absolutely nothing because they talked about the fact, well, we have some differences, the two of us. So Donald Trump ended the conversation by saying, talk later. Do you have a friend or a boyfriend or a girlfriend who always says, talk later, I'm busy? I really have no time for you at all. We'll talk some other time. Just a little bit more.
Communications for former Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. Amanda Galbraith was an advisor to former Prime Minister Stephen Harper. And we're still waiting for Shachi Kurl, who's the president of the Angus Reid Institute, to get technically hooked up. We're having a few glitches, but we hope to have her online soon. Why don't I start with you, Cameron? The Prime Minister's office says Carney and Trump, quote, agreed to reconvene shortly. What's your take on this conversation?
Well, the readout you just shared with us is about the most generic a readout can be for a conversation like this, having written many of them myself. But look, the bottom line that I think we can take away from this conversation is it's good news. The fact that they're talking shows that the dialogue is happening. The fact that the foreign minister just met with her counterpart is also good news. When there's a long stretch where you don't see engagement between the governments, or you see just comments being made by proxies, comments coming on background to the press, that's where you start to worry a little bit about where the talks stand. But as we heard from the sources from the Prime Minister's office, the Prime Minister initiated this call. They're continuing the conversation. The dialogue needs to happen. And obviously, engagement is key.
Now, we'll get back to that in a second. But did you hear that? Well, it's good that they're talking, except they're talking about nothing. It's like a Seinfeld conversation. It's a conversation about nothing. And that's exactly what's going on between Donald Trump and Mark Carney, because Donald Trump has come to the point he despises Mark Carney now. He really has nothing but contempt for Mark Carney because he sees him for what he is, an international grifter, a globalist grifter, who's maintained his whole career by using appointed political positions. And this is the first time he wasn't appointed to a political office, but he uses his positions for his personal gain. And this is Donald Trump is saying, hold it. You're not going to buy the F-35. We've been talking about this. There's two major products that the United States is still the world leader in. One is agriculture. And Colonel Douglas McGregor pointed this out to me the last time he was on my show. The United States is basically down to two things. They don't produce much clothing anymore. They don't produce much electronics. They don't produce much in what is called the Rust Belt today. Manufacturing is basically dead. Agriculture, yeah, they've still got a pretty good hold on that. And what's the other thing? Well, companies like Raytheon and Boeing and McDonnell Douglas, they're all still headquartered in the United States. And what do they make? Armaments, fighter jets, tanks. So Mark Carney is snubbing his nose at Donald Trump this week and saying, I'm going to send Melanie Joly to Sweden to talk to Saab about buying their Gripen fighter jet instead of that F-35 Joint Strike Fighter that Justin Trudeau promised to buy, that Stephen Harper promised to buy, that Jean Chrétien promised to buy. So we've got 16 of them on the way. And now Mark Carney's talking about getting a different variant, another fighter jet. This is not only insane defense policy, it's insane foreign policy. And it's pissing Donald Trump off because Donald Trump says, hey, don't mess with our armaments because we still dominate that sector and don't do it to us. So that's what's happening here. If you're wondering why Donald Trump really is nothing but contempt. But when the CBC basically admits nothing happened on the telephone call, there was nothing of substance discussed. Nothing really transpired. You know that they're in trouble. They're in big trouble. And Mark Carney really has nothing to say to Donald Trump because Donald Trump has nothing to say to him. And this is the rather sad fact of Trump's new relationship with Canada. Guess what? There is no relationship. Now, I wanted to talk about a couple of things that just came to my attention this morning, and I find all of this rather fascinating because we are. Have a look at this Ontario Economic Monitor, January 2025 to June 2025. Employment declined by 38,000 jobs in the second quarter of 2025. Hey, Mark Carney was prime minister then. I thought he was going to increase the job performance. No, I guess not. I guess that's not going to happen, is it? So this is very ominous because Ontario is the most populous province. It employs the most people. Yeah, it's a have-not province that sucks money out of Alberta, but it's still the most populous province, and it still has the most jobs in Canada, and they're declining at an alarming rate. Look at this, Ontario Economic Monitor, same one. Ontario employment changes by census metropolitan areas. Look at that. Look at the decline in Windsor, Kingston, Guelph, Oshawa, Ottawa, Gatineau. Everybody in Ottawa, Gatineau is employed by the federal government. And they're still looking bleak. Because this is interesting. Ontario Economic Monitor. International merchandise exports dropped by 10.2% in the second quarter. Does that have anything to do with the tariffs kicking in? Well, it just might. And maybe that's why Mark Carney doesn't want to talk about how the tariffs are really affecting Canadians. He keeps saying, it's no big deal, folks. It's no big deal because so many things are not affected by tariffs because of the USMCA, US-Mexico, Canada free trade agreement. So Mark Carney can say, well, so many things aren't affected. Obviously, it's having an effect. Looky, that drop. Bang. Minus 10.2. That's ominous, folks. And that means Mark Carney is utterly failing. So on Monday, you may recall there was a summit in Ottawa. Oh, sorry, in Washington, D.C. And guess who was there? Everybody in the European Union except Mark Carney, who says he's really part of Europe and wants Canada to be part of Europe. And I've explained Donald Trump did not want him there at all. So what was Canada doing on Monday? This is emblematic of how screwed up Canada is. Here's your spy agency at work. Back in June, CSIS launched its Pride season celebrations with a few guest speakers. How sweet. Thanks to the talented two-spirit hoop dancer, Makina Rankin-Guerin, the hilarious Canadian comedian Ava Bell, and the inspirational public servant, David Da Silva. That's what CSIS was up to on Monday. Now, I'm not making this up. This is not a parody account. This is not somebody's idea of black humor. This is not somebody's made up news, fake news. No, this actually is from the CSIS site. I mean, and look at this. Visit at PS Pride Network for details on how to continue celebrating. Oh my God. With activities throughout the week, Public Service Pride Week, Public Service Pride. So your spy agency, the Canadian Security Intelligence Service, does two things. It surveys pro-choice Canadians. It surveys evangelicals and conservative Catholics, anybody who's really opposed to the woke policies of the Liberal government. It keeps them under surveillance and puts out annual reports saying the real danger to Canada are these horrible conservatives, these religious extremists, these pro-choice people, or sorry, the pro-life people. The pro-life people, they're the danger to Canada, and that's who we're going to keep under a watchful eye. So that's where your tax dollars are being spent, on Pride season. Remember, I did the show last week with Matt Alexander, and Matt and his wife Nicole were teachers at the Renfrew Public School, and especially in terms of what happened, his wife Nicole really wasn't enthusiastic about celebrating Pride season. So both of them got canned. And they've been unable to teach now for 3 years. And that's how this country is operating today. And it's absolutely outrageous. Now, I got an email last night from Katie Passatney from the Universal Ostrich Farm in British Columbia. They lost their appeal, but Katie tells me they're going to keep fighting. I'm just going to play a bit of this last interview I had. Katie will be on the show tomorrow. Incredible interest in this story, not just in Canada, but the U.S. I've written several articles for U.S. publications, and they're very interested, not just because the Health and Human Secretary got involved, but because of just a sense of injustice with this, and just a family farm being attacked this way. I thought there was injury added to injury from the government at this appeal hearing when they revealed that they expect your farm, family farm, to pay any legal expenses incurred by the government. Like the government can't afford this. And I just find that absolutely outrageous. And what it reminded me of, Katie, is what the government lawyers, what the Crown is trying to do to Chris Barber of Freedom Convoy. They literally want to take his truck away and shut down his livelihood. I mean, well, how would this would be devastating for you, would it not, if you had to pay legal costs for the government?
We at the very end of hearing them go on and on and on, and when we heard half of their legal fees, we just kind of we wouldn't expect anything less, honestly. They came after us last time in the judicial review for half of their court costs. So it was insult to injury, though. You're absolutely right. We sat there in an emotional state of, you don't know if you're going to lose everything. Two families' livelihoods. There's almost 400 souls that are depending on this decision. these animals have so many more years to live, and so much opportunity to offer the world. And here they're coming after us with court costs. Yeah, it was yeah, it was very sad. It was a very sad moment. It really was.
Well, it's punitive, and as I say, it's more than insult. It's secondary injury, and that seems to be what they want here. I might go back to that later, but I wanted before we run out of time this morning, I wanted to show you an Angus Reid poll that I just discovered yesterday. And you know how I'm always talking about the fact that Canadians should be equal under the law. We should not have anything race-based, not race-based hunting, not race-based fishing, not race-based law. But that's, of course, exactly where we are in this country. We have a racist country where certain people are more equal than others, just like in Animal Farm. You remember that's the joke, the black humor in Animal Farm is some animals are more equal than others on Animal Farm. In Canada, some ethnic groups are more equal than others. And in Canada, if you're not part of the First Nations clique, you're not really on par with the rights, the special privileges they have in this country. And that's because we're a race-based country. It's called racism. But I just really am interested to see that Canadians seem to be waking up to how ridiculous this is. And let's have a look at the story. This is fascinating. Canadians divided on Indigenous rights. A new poll has found that Canadians are divided on Indigenous rights. Finally, are Canadians waking up to this? The new poll, commissioned by the Angus Reid Institute, found that while a slight majority of Canadians feel that Indigenous peoples have a unique status, special privileges, in Canada, 55%, and that the vast majority of Indigenous identifying individuals agree. Of course they do. Others are pushing back, with 45% saying Indigenous people should have the same status as others living in a modern Canada, including 2 in 3 Conservative Party voters, 68%. I would say we're asking Canadians whether or not they felt to take kind of two sides or one of two sides on a couple of different statements. Angus Reid, the Angus Reid Institute told Global News. So whether or not they believe that Indigenous peoples have an inherently unique status, read special privileges, or whether they should not have a special status that other Canadians have. The poll found that most Canadians are divided on many of the issues. But of course, what was the response from the chiefs? As I've explained many times, the people who benefit from this unique status, from the billions of dollars the federal government pours in to the reserve system, are not the average Indigenous person. It's the Indigenous leadership. The chiefs love it this way. They can keep getting their cake and eat it too. They can continue to win land claim settlement and take private property away from people at the same time as getting massive government subsidies. And that's what it's all about. And of course, if you object to this, oh, you're the racist. I see. And so we've got Terry Teegee, regional chief of the British Columbia Assembly of First Nations, said he found the poll very disappointing. I'm not surprised that this is coming from the right and from a conservative point of view. Oh, matter of fact, I think it's creating more harm than good. He goes on to say that if you don't agree with the current system, you're racist. Sorry, it's you who are the racist. It's you. Your thinking is racist. When you divide people by race and ethnicity, when one group of Canadians has more rights than another group of Canadians, I'm sorry, that's the very definition of racism. And this has to stop. We need to scrap the Indian Act, scrap the reserve system, and we all need to live in this country as equals with no special privileges. So I'm glad to see Canadians are finally waking up and saying, this is utter nonsense, and we have to move on from this. We have to find a better way. Instead of granting special privileges to one group over another instead of basing activities in this country on race. Let's move beyond it because it's destroying this country. It's the worst form of identity politics there is. And I can see finally, I'm surprised Angus Reid even asked the question, because if you dare question the status quo in this country, you're immediately branded as being racist. And that is absolutely beyond the pale. And these kind of smears have to stop. So I was very, very happy to see that. Now let's have a look. We did a lot of coverage of Feucht, when he came to Canada in July. He's back in Canada right now. Now, what do you think is happening to Sean this time around? Well, do you think he's having an easier time of it? I would think perhaps he's having an easier time of it, because last time Canada was embarrassed before the world as a country that does not respect freedom of religion, that as a country that does not respect free speech, as a country that does not respect freedom of assembly. So let's have a look at Sean's X timeline here, because it's interesting how he's been doing. Let's have a look. Big news. This is the only place in Canada that has shown the guts to allow him to perform at a public venue that he chose. And actually, he was invited to perform on the steps of the Alberta legislature. He's doing that today, 6 o'clock to 8 o'clock Mountain Time in Edmonton. If you're in Alberta, if you're in Calgary or Edmonton or Red Deer or Medicine Hat, go see Sean today and show your support for freedom of religion before we don't have any freedom of religion. And I love this. He was in Saskatchewan, of course, and he had a great time there. But once again, everywhere he goes, the mayors, the councils are not welcoming. And here's Nadine Ness commenting, wow, does Saskatoon ever show up for Sean Feucht? Let Us Worship concert. The energy is amazing. And here's the response has been tremendous everywhere he's gone. I love this. Kelowna canceled Sean Feucht. Of course, he's going to be performing there. But Kelowna, BC, they used to be a really conservative town. Abbotsford is also canceled. That's supposed to be part of the Bible Belt. And here's a letter of support from Macklin McCall, a member of the Legislative Assembly of British Columbia, who clearly says, public safety is important, but so is protecting the fundamental freedoms of British Columbia. And the point is, Sean Feucht poses no danger to public safety. All he's doing is holding worship services. He's not even talking politics, which, of course, is exactly what the enemies of freedom have been accusing him of. Oh, he's a MAGA influencer. He supports Donald Trump, so therefore he shouldn't be allowed to sing, perform, or preach anywhere in Canada, because Canada doesn't do that sort of thing. You can do just about anything else in this country. I love this one. Wait a second here. Is this the Christian mayor of Winnipeg that some pastors and people are defending? He seems to love, celebrate, and accommodate pride parades. And what happens at these pride parades? Men walk about half nude, sometimes fully nude, with their private parts exposed to children. The Christian mayor of Winnipeg thinks that's great. he's going to be there for Pride Parade. This is absolutely outrageous. This is not Christian activity. And if any pastors out there, if you really are a Christian, give your head a shake, get on your knees, and ask for forgiveness for supporting this kind of nonsense and not supporting Sean Feucht. And that's it. That's exactly what's going on in this country. Gutless Christians, gutless evangelicals who can't stand up for basic religious freedom and would rather go to a pride parade. What is wrong with this country? Just about everything. And I love what he's saying. Here's an independent journalist who went to one of his concerts and reported. I want to read this whole thing. I went to the Sean Feucht concert because I wanted to see with my own eyes. This is Carla Joy Treadway. Canada allows Hamas protesters to burn the Canadian flag, chanting death to Canada. It allows Sharia law events. It allows Khalistani rallies where men with swords storm government buildings. So surely I was about to witness unseen horrors at this event, since every Canadian city had preemptively pulled permits to ban this man, and every mainstream outlet painted him as a dangerous MAGA with unacceptable views. I came prepared to see what I was told would be a rally of hate. Maybe he was rounding up Canadians to crown Trump as king. At the very least, I expected violence. Here's my boots on the ground report. I'll read one line. Sean sang worship songs about Jesus. He shared stories of addicts leaving drugs behind, people surrendering depression, and strangers asking for prayer. I watched as others gathered round praying, crying, embracing. Oh, that sounds really horrible. But that's how sick, I'm sorry, this country has become. That's how depraved this country has become. Because now we see that as being dangerous and somehow inciting violence and somehow being a threat to public safety. We see Christians, the same Christians who founded this country in 1867. We see Christians as the danger, but anything else is allowed. You can block traffic. You can occupy public buildings. You can start fires. You can do whatever you want to push your woke agenda, and the police will stand by and do nothing. The police will stand by and just watch. And the mayors and the council people will applaud you. The prime minister will attend your event like he did in Vancouver. Mark Carney said nothing in defense of Sean Feucht or freedom of religion. He shows up at a Vancouver gay pride parade and embraces a half-nude man to tell you where his sentiment is, to tell you where his real feelings are in terms of freedom. He thinks that's okay, but he did not say a word in defense of real freedom. Now, I had a post there I wanted to show you because I predicted something yesterday that actually came true. And for some reason, yeah, I'm just trying to find it here. Because this is good news. This is really good news. Pierre Poilievre posted yesterday, your home, your family, your life. If someone breaks in, you deserve the right to defend your loved ones and your property. Full stop. So Pierre Poilievre posted that on X yesterday. He is coming out in favor of the right to defend your property, your home, your family, and your life from people who break in and threaten it. And of course, Doug Ford went on at length about how horrible this is, that the law is what it is. It's provincial law, Doug. You're the Premier of Ontario. Do something about it. Stop playing the hypocrite. Stop grandstanding like you're really a conservative who's outraged about this. Stop being the faux conservative. Stop being the liberal just in Mark Carney's closet who thinks Mark Carney's doing a really, really good job. If Pierre Poilievre becomes prime minister, I hope the criminal code is amended by his attorney general within the first week to allow Canadians to use what force is necessary to protect their lives, their homes, their families, their property from intruders. I have had enough of this woke country, of this weak-kneed nation. And it's embodied by the weak-kneed, pusillanimous Mark Carney, net zero Mark Carney. He's delivered absolutely zero. That's not an okay sign. That's a zero. Mark Carney has failed miserably as prime minister, and he promises to do even more failure, to deliver more failure. So don't believe the propaganda from CBC or the prime minister's office that this was a productive phone call yesterday with Donald Trump. It was a disastrous phone call because it was like somebody calling up an old friend or previous friend or a past friend who really doesn't want to talk to you. And they might shoot the breeze for a few minutes about, remember when, and it's too bad we have so many difficulties now. It's too bad we have so many differences. It would be nice if we could see eye to eye. It would be really good if we could agree on more specific things. But guess what? I'm really busy right now, Mark, and I've got other things to do. It's tea time here in Washington, and we'll talk later. And that's exactly the response Mark Carney got. CBC is trying its best, the mainstream media in Canada, trying its best to say Mark Carney's delivering. Faux conservatives like Doug Ford are doing their best to support Mark Carney, are doing their best to say Mark Carney's doing a great job. And I don't care what your political stripe is. It doesn't matter because we're all on the same team. No, we're not all on the same team. Democracies have division because we have an opposition to the official government narrative. You don't have to agree with the government. That's called democracy. That's what Canada is supposed to be. So no, we don't all play on the same team. And it's not Team Canada that Mark Carney wants Pierre Poilievre to join. It's Team Carney. And thank God, I think Poilievre got the message during that by-election in Alberta, in Battle River, Crowfoot. He got the message from probably hundreds of people at the doors he knocked on who said, don't go back to Ottawa and be co-opted by Mark Carney and the Liberal government. Don't go back to Ottawa and play on Team Carney. Don't go back to Ottawa and just say, we'll support whatever legislation you come out with. I think Poilievre listened, and I think he's going to come back to Ottawa with new policies. He won't be co-opted by this Liberal government, and he's going to provide a viable, tangible opposition that is there in the face of Mark Carney every day. Because if people think Poilievre should sit there as a lapdog and say and do nothing to stop this tyrannical Mark Carney government from continuing to destroy Canada, to continue to destroy its economy, its values, its richness, its heritage, everything about this country, then they are delusional. And I think Pierre Poilievre is going to provide something better than that. I'll be back in a minute after a brief break for the store. thank you all for your tremendous support yesterday. That was my biggest program in a long time. I really appreciate your supporting, sharing it with your friends and family, because YouTube won't do it. You will. I really appreciate it. It's been a great week. It's a beautiful day today. I'm going to try to get outside for a while, but I'll be back again tomorrow and hope to have a brief interview tomorrow with Katie Passett from the Universal Ostrich Farm to give us an update on what's happening. And we've got some great things coming for you next week. Keep your head up and keep your optimism high, because we're going to keep fighting back on a country that we sometimes think has forgotten us, but it's not the country, it's the government. And we're going to shake this government up in the fall. We're going to shake this country up, because we need to do that. Thanks for watching today. Back again tomorrow, same time, same place. Have a great Friday. Back again Saturday. God bless this country. Godspeed to all of you.